just, we had a little snafu with our meeting ID, but we were supposed to be talking about that tonight.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's right. I'm recording now because it's 6:30, and I think we nearly have a quorum. Let's see. It's hard to tell with Zoom. You can't just look around the room. You have to get your settings right.
Well, do you want to call the roll?
Well, let's see. I only see 4 committee members on line so far, and we need 5.
There's Spencer.
Oh, is Spencer
That
on
pushes
now?
up to 5.
Yeah.
And Angie.
And that, and Angie. Yeah. Okay, we're good. Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys.
So Kelly, do you want to call the roll?
Let's see. Let's see. Sorry, just a second.
It's okay.
Okay. Let me see if I can get everyone. So Lisa,
Hanairo.
and Hanairo, and Andy Yu. I don't think he's on yet. Weitzel. I don't think she's on yet. Wu, you're here. I saw you. And Hovey,
Yep.
Spencer, Schumacher,
Here.
Carrie, Angie, Carrie.
Here.
Yep. And Chris, you're here.
Here.
Yep. And Richard, are you here? I don't think he's here yet. He and I are texting right now.
Is 7843 anybody?
I might have to unmute if it's Hello, is that you, Dick, on the phone calling in?
No, this is Joe from Pelletieri.
Oh, Joe from Pelletieri. Okay, could you tell me again who you are? What your name is? Joe what?
Joe Spare from Pelletieri Waste Systems.
Okay. And then Tim is on as well from Pelletieri. And I see Sherry Gruder. Okay, I think I've got it.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, welcome everybody to my first meeting chairing this committee. I'm really excited. We'll start with the first item of business, which is approval of our meeting minutes from last time. Kelly circulated those, and so I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Sure, I move.
I will
Any
second it.
second? Thank you. Any discussion?
Okay, wait, I need to know who moved the first, who made the
Kermit.
motion? Okay.
Kermit moved
Katie's-
and Katie seconded.
Okay, and I did have a couple minor edits from Angie Carey that she sent to me via email, so we'll get those into the minutes. So I guess I should say that Kermit moves to approve the minutes with the edits that Angie Carey has provided.
May I ask, are the edits just like
Hi, Dick here.
grammar? Or... Did you hear that, Kelly?
What?
Dick is here.
Oh, great. Okay. Got it.
I trust the edits are minor.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes with minor corrections signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, moving on to the next item, public comments. We have an opportunity for anybody who would like to make a public comment for the record. We ask everyone to keep your time to 3 minutes, and please, well, I was going to say raise your hand, but I know not everybody is viewing. Some people I think are just calling in by phone. So I would just ask you to speak up if you would like to make a public comment. All right, not hearing any interest. Just want to check and make sure nobody's on the phone muted. Nope, it looks like everyone's had a chance. Okay, so no public comments. Kelly, let's move on to staff updates.
Okay.
Oh, this was Sherry. I couldn't unmute, but
Oh, okay.
just
Sorry about that, Sherry.
no, it's fine. My only thing I just wanted to say is that probably you all know that the governor's climate change task force has been having public hearings, and the last one was last week, but they're still allowing public comment through the end of July. And so I just would like to recommend that if members are interested, that they look through what the options are that so far the committee's come up with, and maybe stress what is important, might be important to Middleton. Kelly already made comments at the last meeting. I got to hear them. They were great. And then in addition to that, I would just say that there are some ideas in there that could be helpful in formulating the plan for this committee. So those are good documents, and they're available on the Climate Task Force website. So that's all.
Excellent. Thank you for that comment. And yes, I know Kelly was attending the last one. I believe Kermit attended one as well. I participated in a couple just to learn about what they were doing, and that task force's activity is definitely on our radar as a committee. So thank you for bringing that up.
I believe they're
Okay.
also going to be at the Baxter meeting the first Thursday of August. And I think they're going to talk a little bit about what their plans are for Dane County. So if anyone's interested in hearing about the Dane County Climate Action Plan, you can attend the Baxter meeting virtually.
Okay, Chris, just to clarify, I did see an email come out from Kathy Kuntz regarding a Dane County CAP presentation.
Yep.
I don't believe Baxter's is meeting again until the fall.
It said August 6th.
Yeah, the subject heading didn't, oh, okay. August 6th, I don't think is the regular Thursday, is it? It was, but maybe, I'm sorry, if they're lining up as the Baxter meeting, then that's, I think they're throwing the invitation larger. It wasn't just a Baxter thing, it was a county organized event.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else want to make a public comment? Last call. Okay, Kelly, would you please give a staff update?
Sure. So my priorities right now to work on are the comprehensive plan, which is nearly complete and ready for making its rounds through the committees. We're hoping to have the comp plan finished and in its formatted form for the first round of feedback by the end of August. So probably sometime in September, early September, I'll either schedule a special session for this committee to go over it, or we'll go over it during the September meeting, depending on the timeline of when things need to happen to get it finalized. And then also I'm working on collecting data for Lead for Cities. All of this stuff seems really like it's great that it's all happening at once, but it's like a chicken and egg, because certain things I wish I had the other thing finished for the other thing. It's good. I'm also working on project management for our solar installation of the 3 buildings in Middleton, the Lakeview Park Shelter, the MOC, the Municipal Operations Center, and the EMS building. And that's been slowed down a bit because we switched our building. We were going to put solar on the senior center building, but that building didn't work out that it would be the best situation for solar. So we switched it to the Lakeview building, which was under construction, and some of the construction documents weren't finished and they hadn't established yet what kind of electrical service they were going to have there. So there was a lot of back and forth during just the construction meetings. So that's what's held up some of the bid documents for this project. One thing that's happened in that time is that the Focus on Energy grant is nearly empty, and we may not be able to receive any of the Focus on Energy money, which is part of what we need to have to do this project. So we're now discussing whether we need to bid the project like in early January, and when we can get the full amount, or whether we bid the project now with the stipulation that we need the Focus on Energy funds if there's any left, and if there is enough left to cover it, then we would go ahead this fall or this in late summer. So this week I'll know a lot more about that because we're having lots of meetings about it. It's just been really a constant back and forth with our design engineer and the contractor at Lakeview and city engineers. And the city government has such a very strict way of bidding documents. All the design has to be completed. We cannot bid any portion of any type of design in a bid document. So that's not how the commercial world works, or even how school districts work. So it's been difficult to make sure that our design engineer understands that. So it's held it up a little bit, but I think it'll in the end be a really solid project. Also, we're wrapping up the State Office Energy Innovation Grant for the energy plan, which has been completed, as you know, and now it's just a lot of collecting invoices and submitting all the documents to the PSC, the Public Service Commission, so that we can wrap that grant up and get paid. And then one interesting thing that you might all be interested in is that Dane County and the City of Madison, established the Sustainability Leadership Collaborative working groups last year to help communities collaborate in Dane County on a number of sustainability issues. One of those is fleet management and switching our municipal fleets over to EVs. And they arranged to have a fleet meetup where the mechanics from each community could go and actually look in the vehicles, talk to other mechanics. So they wouldn't be talking to people like me or department heads, they'd be talking actually to the people who work on the cars and trucks so that they could get a real sense for what's required and how their jobs might change and how the cars perform. And all of our guys were signed up to go. We had 3 people signed up from the police department and from our operations and our fleet mechanic. And then the morning of the meetup, there was a situation in Middleton where there was a woman who was lost in the conservancy. And so the police couldn't go, and they also asked for help from city operations staff to help search the conservancy. So in the end, our mechanic didn't get to attend that meeting. And so I'm really sad about that. I mean, it's understandable, but I think that they really set that up for Middleton, because I really have been asking that. I think our mechanic needs to speak to other mechanics. And so I think we'll devise like a Zoom meeting or some specialized meeting where maybe our mechanic and operations person can just go to Madison, look at some cars that are there, and just talk one-on-one with some of the folks. So we're still really committed to that. But the budget deliberations for next year are coming up. So this is all now becoming time crunched on the decisions we're going to make on our city fleet. So we may need to apply some more pressure, or really look into like, what training do you need? We'll pay for it type stuff in the coming month or two. And then another update I could give is that we got our bird renewal, our Bird City USA renewal, and thanks to Deb, because she helped me wrap that renewal document up. It was really helpful. Thank you, Deb. So that's we just need to pay them a small fee. And then it was brought to my attention today that there's a garden that someone has made themselves down at Lakeview Park. There's a boardwalk that goes from Maywood Street into Lakeview Park, and along that pathway, someone has put in their own food garden. And so Mark Wagner was interested to, talk about maybe engaging the sustainability committee and asking Abby, and I haven't discussed this with Abby yet, but talk about maybe we should have a small community garden there. We surely wouldn't want to prohibit them from doing that necessarily. It's, I think, people who live in those apartments who have made this small little garden plot. But the problem is there's no access to water there. And I think they've explored that option before. And I don't know if it was cost prohibitive or impossible, but they don't have a water source. So I don't know how they're watering the garden. But stay tuned, because that might become something we could get involved in or offer insights on. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I don't think the city wants to necessarily discourage it, but maybe formalize it a little bit or make it more accessible to other people as well. What else? I think that's all I'll say for right now. The last thing I could mention is that we're circling back around to talk about how to get back into discussing our civic community campus development that was sort of slated for 2025 when our TID district was going to close out. It would be a chance that the city would have a larger chunk of money that they could reinvest in the downtown for perhaps civic assets. And all of that seems really, maybe tone deaf or maybe it's impossible now, we're not sure, with the budget crisis that'll come about because of COVID. We're not, and just how the budget's going to be tied up over the next few years. So we've sort of dialed that back to maybe addressing public engagement more around equity and about what are the barriers that exist right now in our community for individuals in different communities and neighborhoods to access the civic assets that we do have, like our library and our senior center. What are the biggest things that different neighborhoods or communities that usually don't have access to a lot of the services in Middleton, what do they need and what would they like to see happen? So we're sort of trying to use LEAD for Cities quality of life credits, which are very much grounded in equity to look at public engagement efforts that we can take on right now, even though everything is kind of virtual and difficult to do. So there's more to come on that as well. But we haven't completely dropped that work. It's just we're trying to redefine it in a way that makes sense for the community.
Kelly, will you keep us in the loop on as talks begin on those again? I know if we aren't involved early on in the sustainable building of the building, it gets thrown out the door quickly just because of the argument of cost. And if everyone's already worried about cost and we haven't even started talking about it yet, I want to just make sure that we, if we can just make sure we're on the front edge of that one, because we're going to need as much pushing as we can and to help make that one happen.
Yes, thank you. That we will need the committee on that. The council did accept the sustainability goals that we wrote up, which is great. But those were still fairly vague, and even though they were lofty goals, it didn't really get down into the detailed how do you accomplish that. So we'll see how the building project progresses. They had the city had their first meeting again with the consultants today, and we learned that Bob Cost, I think, who was one of the consultants, is actually retiring. So today was his last meeting. So he was someone who would provide continuity to the project, and he's now leaving. So I think there's quite a bit up in the air on that right now, but I don't want to speak for anyone else on it because I'm involved but not directly in all those meetings.
The other item you mentioned is the budget. I can imagine that there's going to be budget changes, but to me, it's a very vague concept of how our budget's being affected. I mean, there's obviously sales tax. I mean, I understand that the world is going to be different coming out of this, but will you make sure, I guess the other thing is, I'd love to have some sort of summary thought process to understand how we are going to be shortfall or numbers. You read different things in the paper, and to automatically assume we're going to have huge budget issues is beyond my knowledge also. So it'd be awesome if we could just kind of, I'd love to just kind of be able to grasp that, to understand it, so we can help out and maybe come up with a smart way for us to have some sustainable ideas to save some money.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that stuff will become more public. Bill our financial director, has gone over this and has already produced documents showing, where he thinks the shortfalls will be, what contingencies we have, how we're in a good position for the next year, but it's maybe the years after that get a little bit more tricky. So I think the budget deliberations, which we'll talk about later in the agenda, the schedule for that has been released. So there's going to be a lot of budget talk over the next 2 or 3 months. Lots of ways to engage and learn and understand where the city stands because of COVID.
Thank you.
And then before we go to the first agenda item, I also wanted to give an update on the Pheasant Branch Creek Corridor Master Plan, and turn it over to Deb and Spencer just to really quickly summarize the meeting that they took part in for the Sustainability Committee on. It was the request for proposal selection to see which consultants the city will hire to actually do the work in the Pheasant Branch Creek corridor. Do you want to speak on that, Deb or Spencer? Oh, Deb, you're muted.
I can start, and then Deb can take over. There were 2 different meetings. I was on the one with restoration, and Deb was on the one for the trail and bridges. There were 5 different contractors who submitted bids. There were 6 people from different areas of the city and the public who were weighing in on it. Some more technical experts, sure, more technical experts than me, they all were, but there was definitely a range of people. There was 20 to 25 people on the meeting, the mayor and a lot of our council. There were 2 contractors in the end who the group of 6 decided were, it was a split vote on what proposals they thought. I think 3 or 4 of the 5 proposals the city has all worked with on Pheasant Branch before, so there is a track record. I thought it was, there was a lot of people who had a lot of knowledge. You had the city, Mike Davis had a city, engineer or somebody there who was weighing in a lot on whether they had done good work and stuck to a timeline. So that's my update. Deb, go ahead.
Oh,
You're
can
up.
you hear me, or did I mute it?
Oh, you're
No, I
good.
can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay, all right. As Spencer said, I had the bridge and trail RFPs. There were 3 of those. KL Engineering was the first one we looked at, and their timeline was much too long. They were probably a year longer than the other 2 proposals, so they were pretty quickly eliminated. MSA and Strand were the other 2 RFPs, and they were pretty much tied in terms of votes. Ken Potter really drove home that there needed to be a HEC-class model that was done on the hydrology of the stream in terms of could bridges withstand another flood. And the only one that had that was MSA. So he was really pushing the votes to go to MSA. Strand assumed that some stream bank restoration RFP would be handling that, so they assumed they wouldn't have to, is what they put in their RFP. So who knows? However, they've all had experience in Middleton with doing different projects. Strand actually was involved in the preliminary look-see at the Stagecoach. The city owns a bit of property there where they were going to put in a trailhead, and that hasn't happened yet, but Strand was part of that planning process, so that would have been a good transition between this project and that other project. Strand also was talking about trying to alleviate hairpin turns to make the trails safer. The other RFPs wanted to expand them to 12 feet, make them actually wider. In my mind, bicycles will go faster if they have more area to travel over. That's kind of, if you look at research that was done in neighborhoods, when they widened the streets, cars actually moved faster through a neighborhood because they felt it was safer being a wider street. So anyway, it ended up a tie between Strand and the other one, MSA. So once again, finance is going to look at those. And MSA and Strand were within, I don't know, $1,000, give or take a little, of each other. So it was very, very similar pricing.
In our meeting, it was a tie between MSA and I think Cardinal, and there was big differences in price between them. So, and that was part of the reason it was a tie, I think.
Cardinal always gives a good deal, it sounds like.
Cardinal also has been working on this whole project. They're the ones who came up with the plan for it, right? So they have a lot of money already invested in it. So I think it was maybe less expensive because they've already done a lot of their hydrology stuff.
So just to be clear, who are the two that came out on top? MSA.
In my meeting, it was MSA and Cardinal, and Deb's it was MSA and Strand.
Yes. And I understand Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night, so they'll be voting on this issue.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, so there were two different meetings that had votes. Were these just like straw polls, or were they definitive in some way?
We have no power, but we made recommendations to Finance and Council.
Okay, so finance has the final say?
Probably Council is final say.
Council.
Okay, got it.
And will they select one?
One for each.
One for
One
each.
for each.
One
Yeah.
for
So both of the MSA and I can't remember the other one were the only two whose MSA submitted a proposal for both. All the other ones are pretty separated, and MSA had a $30,000 to $40,000 discount if they were selected for both of them, right? So the finance changed numbers if they were doing both projects.
Yeah, but the 36,000 savings, if you look at adding the cost of Strand and Cardinal, it was actually cheaper than MSA even with the discount.
I have some questions for Kelly, but before I ask, I'll ask, does anybody else have questions for Spencer and Deb?
This is Katie. So Deb and Spencer, are you recommending Strand and Cardinal for the projects? Is that what you hope?
I'm recommending Strand.
You're recommending Strand? Spencer, what are you thinking?
I am pretty split on it. I think both companies will do a good job with it. My gut tells me if you have one contractor for both projects, it helps coordinate and move it together. But I think I voted maybe Cardinal in the official vote, but there was a lot of good arguments on both sides, and I was deferring more to people like Ken Potter, who really are invested in hydrology and know more what they're doing on that.
Okay.
This is Dick. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I biked the system a few times, and I was surprised of how easy it is to bike through it. And I was surprised that the bridges are back. And I guess one of the things that we had raised in an earlier meeting is, and we recommended it, that at least upstream issues be dealt with as far as, infiltrating or hold back or building sustainable infrastructure upstream, so that we don't spend a lot of money fixing this whole system before we have the capacity to hold back another 7-inch rainstorm, and which is not a lot. So I'm just really curious is the fact that now you can go through the system, you can bike there, people walking there. I feel like it's heavily used, and the bridges are up. You can go top to bottom. We're talking about new money being spent, and it surprises me that we have a system that functions. And are we spending money on really upgrading beyond what we have before we're fixing being sustainable on trying to hold back water upstream? So I'm just asking that question.
Dick, I think if you read through the proposals, they're all on the, not our minutes, but they were on the city website. The meeting I was at was all about the restoration and holding back and creating things. It only goes up to, I don't know, Costco or wherever right there. It doesn't go further. I know this Westport and the town of Middleton are starting to use that as leverage in their airport negotiations. So that's something that we'll have to be tuned into a little bit on the water retention above it. But I think that's it's a good point. But the second phase of the bridges in the past come after the restoration happens.
Well, my point is that we have a functioning corridor now. At least people are using it. I was able to bike up and down it a couple times. I don't know how much money we're talking about here in these contracts that the restoration and the other one. I just don't want to see us put a whole lot of money, of community money in it, fixing it and making it a really nice system before we really address the upstream issues. If it's possible to get something done, maybe it's not possible, but my point has been raised, so whatever.
Well, thanks for that comment, Dick. I guess I would ask, again, Spencer and Deb, sorry to put you two on the spot. You have to be the experts on this for us. But Spencer, when you refer to the restoration work coming before the bridges and the trails, I mean, I'm kind of hearing flood prevention, but maybe I'm mistaken, because I agree with Dick. It doesn't make sense to invest in new bridges or, rebuilding trails until we're sure that they're not going to be destroyed by another rainfall. So are there flood prevention measures taking place first?
There are. And one great example is next to Cromery. One of these organizations, Cardinal or MSA, or one of them who was in it, I think it was MSA, did the stream bank next to
Park.
Cromery, that they did the restoration. Oh, and actually, not east of Park, but west of it beforehand. And during the initial flood, it didn't get damaged when it came through. So they had created they'd already done an upgrade to the system. One of the systems that they're doing is one of the companies that was involved in it was talking about doing that restoration. But if you look at, again, I don't have maybe Kelly can even bring up the drawings of it, but there's sections where they're focusing on, I think there's probably 5 different touch points they're talking about the restoration. Is that correct, Deb? Remember looking at those?
The drawings? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
the drawings of the stream bank restoration and the flood mitigation systems.
Yeah, I saw those too at that meeting I think you were at and I was at. Maybe there's a more recent meetings that you've been to, but yeah, there are 5 different sections or whatever. I guess I was just surprised that the bridges were back in place. Now, are these the old bridges? I mean, we're talking about putting new, more sustainable bridges, right? That's what the whole thing was about, is putting pilings that were deeper and farther away from the stream bank and make them less susceptible to being washed out by the next flood. But we have a system that's at least something you can pass on now. So I guess I'm surprised that we've got work done, and now we're talking about more contract work without really dealing with the upstream holding back water issue, which makes the whole thing sustainable. So
the bridges are just temporary. They got those things back together. There was just enough public outcry and need for it, but everything that's in there currently is a temporary system.
Yep. And I probably should mention that the RFPs for the bridges and trails is only about getting ready for getting bids for a contractor to actually come and to do the building. They're not building them. This is a whole nother phase that's yet to be.
That's good information to have. And I know with the high school construction project, I had inquired, I was at a breakfast with the Education Foundation and asked if they were building in green infrastructure or low impact development to retain water on the site instead of letting it all rush down into Pheasant Branch. And they seem to be interested in it, but I don't know. I've lost track. That was before the pandemic started, so I've lost track of where they stand on the design of the and the construction of the new part of the new wing of the school. But that's an opportunity there. So, well, being mindful of the number of items we have on our agenda, I do want to move on. However, I did have a couple of questions, Kelly, for you. Quickly, if possible, you mentioned funding being an issue for the solar installations, and I'm wondering, was it only the Lakeview building that is the problem?
Well, nothing's a problem. It's just the timing changed because we changed buildings.
And
so
is that the one that has the timing issue?
Lakeview?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's still under construction and they just made some major decisions like a couple weeks ago on the electrical.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's all proceeding. It's just coordinating timelines between construction projects and our own internal design engineer and
so is that something that we would need to think about for our capital budget request or no?
No.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, we would do a budget rollover, and then I'd write a memo explaining why, and then give it to council. It typically isn't a problem, but again, like this, because of COVID, I'm always nervous, even though that money has already been earmarked for this project, and it's a specific pot of money that came from a revolving loan fund. So it's not just money that could be put back into the general fund and used for anything. Like it's got stipulations with it. So I think it's probably safe, but I just always feel nervous about, hey, here's $300,000 that we haven't spent yet. And we're in a, I don't know what the budget, what counts, how council will see that. So I hope that Katie and Kathy and people still support solar. I mean, in the past, this project has gotten a lot of support from council. So we'll just try to get it done as quickly as we can, but in a way that's legal and right, because you have to do these bids a certain way, and it's not the way that a lot of solar is bid outside of the municipal state statutes or requirements.
Okay. Thank you. Another question on the garden, the the pop-up garden that was discovered. Do we have data on who uses, like demographic data on who uses the, or applies to get the public garden plots?
Well, these aren't established garden plots at all. It was
Right.
just kind of.
Right. That's why I'm asking. I'm wondering, you know, do we know who's using the established ones? Because clearly somebody found a need to set up their own, and I'm wondering if access is an issue or affordability or what. So
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think it's a minority couple. I think they live in the apartments there, but I don't want to speculate on, you know,
Sure.
who it is or what, you know, I don't know any more details about it. It's just sort of an indicator from the community that perhaps there is a need, and that we should look again at a community garden plot at Lakeview Park. It's been talked about before. It's not that this hasn't gone through deliberation before, but there were reasons in the past for not putting a community garden at Lakeview. It's already jam-packed with a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think water was an issue and space. But, you know, I don't want to take anything off the table if it's a need.
Right. Well,
Lisa, we do
go
have,
ahead.
there is, there's a garden committee that is kind of in charge of the 2 community gardens, and they have the demographics and the people who use all of it. It was been quite a few years since I've seen that information, but it is out there somewhere.
Okay, maybe that can be something we address when we get to the, in our sustainable city plan, get to the chapter on food.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me if, you know, but I don't know if we earmark a certain number of the garden plots to be available to lower income gardeners, but that certainly would be important to have. Go ahead.
Can I just, I fully agree with what you just said. I think this is something that we should be looking at in the broader context, because there were some issues within the last year and a half about this garden over by the old M. Long School, that was now the administrative center for the school district, about a garden, a multi-unit garden there. Who was using it, who's paying for it, and our committee has been supporting it. But this other bigger garden that we have was self-sustaining. So I think it's really important, if we, looking at our whole sustainability plan, if we decide that we need more community gardens, I think we should look at it all in the bigger context and not just focus on this one kind of little garden that's sprang up, because maybe we need a lot more, but we got to figure out who manages them, and if there's a certain base fee that people that use them have to pay or whatever. I think it's an important issue, but not one we could solve with this particular issue.
Sure.
So this is
Sure.
Andy. And when they fill out their applications, there's a sliding scale where they can indicate where they fall in terms of income, and then the fee that they would pay to have a plot at the gardens. So that information should be available through the garden committee.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, Kelly, that was the last question I had for you. So did anyone else have questions for Kelly on her staff update?
Mhm.
Hearing none, let's move on to the item. Kermit's got a text. Okay, Kermit, if this doesn't have to do with what we are talking about right now, I'll read this text this chat later.
It can be read later. It's totally
Okay.
correcting information I had earlier regarding the climate action plan meetings. So
okay,
people
great.
can look at it at their leisure. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you for the correction. Okay, let's move on to the Sustainability Committee Equity Statement Draft Discussion. Who on that subcommittee would like to speak to the draft?
Well, we put the draft together kind of as individuals and then collectively. And I think we're at the stage now for the committee to take a look at it and to ask questions, to edit, to add or delete what they think, and we'll finalize it.
You guys
Does
did a nice job with
everybody,
it.
have all the committee members had a chance to read through what Kelly sent?
I have not.
I'm sorry, I don't recognize everyone's voices. Who was that?
That was Angie. I have not had a chance to go through it.
Okay, thank you, Angie.
This is Dick. I read through it. I'm not sure what the question is. What is the question? Do we approve it, or
I was just making sure all the committee members had a chance, had received it and had a chance to look it over.
And I did, and I was assuming that by breaking certain sections out, we were going to be evaluating the whole plan, like the night transportation and what the other one was, and then we'll be doing water in the next month.
Dick, I think you're on item number 5. We're still on item 4 on the agenda, which is the statement. I don't know if you're at your computer and can see Kelly's screen, but this is the Middleton Sustainability Committee statement on equity. We talked for background, we talked about this on the June meeting, just the need to say something.
Okay,
yeah, no, it's fine. I just wanted to clarify the need for this committee to say something. And we discussed the idea of reinforcing the concept of sustainability for all. That if, you know, it's great to have solar and electric charging stations and all these things, but if we have basic needs not being met and people in our community not being respected, and, you know, fortunately not here that we know of, but being brutalized just because of their race, then our efforts at sustainability can't go, you know, they're not going to make a difference. If we don't have respect for people first, how can we expect respect for the environment? And so I really like what you all did. I had a couple of general comments. One, I note that the city council is going to be considering a statement tomorrow recognizing racism as a public health crisis. And I wonder, instead of mentioning the sorry, Kelly, I keep wanting to scroll scroll your screen and I can't.
Scroll it down.
Yeah, sure. Instead of the paragraph on the Madison Sustainable Madison Committee and their resolution, I think, yeah, there it is right there, as a committee. I think it might be more powerful to reference our own City of Middleton resolution that they're going to be considering tomorrow, and specifically whether, I mean, we're not going to finish this up by tomorrow, but referencing this as a public health crisis. Another comment that I had is to dial it back a little. I admire the enthusiasm in trying to create a sustainable world, but I think given our charge as a committee, our focus really should be on a sustainable city. Ideally, that's going to be a part of a more sustainable world, but I think references towards working towards a sustainable world, really it's more accurate that as a committee, our mission is to create a more sustainable Middleton for, you know, all our neighbors. And then the final general comment that I had is in the paragraph that's showing as we together address the challenge of sustainability. I really think, and I spoke to this on our June call, that the respect for the environment is not achievable unless we first have respect for, and I would say compassion too, for people. So the sentence about respect being essential to support human diversity and biodiversity, how can we attain that if we don't hold the natural world in respect? You know, we need that to build on the human respect. I think it's the other way around. And maybe I'm just misreading this paragraph as it's written. But I can share if you all are entertaining specific comments. I can certainly share some suggested edits to turn that around and emphasize that it's the respect and compassion for people that has to be in place first before we can hope to achieve the same for our natural world around us.
Okay, so you're saying that in the last paragraph, create a sustainable community. Replace world with community?
Yep.
Okay. Are we taking notes on this, or how are we doing this?
Yeah. I'm trying to capture what you're saying in the notes. I wonder if I think I can actually edit this the way I screen shared it. I think I can actually edit the document directly. It's hard to, I can type so fast when it's just free association.
Sure.
When I have to like get in and, okay. So,
well, and Kelly, I certainly don't expect you to, I don't expect us to wordsmith this on the phone. I spent an hour wordsmithing a definition of resilient Great Lakes Basin last week. And that was only like 3 sentences. And so I think we can use our time more effectively if we set a deadline for sharing comments. I know we can't reply to all, but I know we want to wrap this up in a timely fashion, certainly not before the City Council votes on its resolution tomorrow, but would the subcommittee entertain receiving comments through the end of this week?
Sure. I mean, I think part of our understanding or thought was that we'd be getting feedback now, and then we would process it and massage it into a final draft after tonight. But if we want to allow additional time for people to provide comments, that's fine by my thinking anyways. I don't know, Daphne, Deb, any thoughts?
Yeah, I had a similar thought that we were going to be hearing things tonight that we could incorporate, corrections, additions, whatever, and then we would get it finalized. However, I guess we can, do that at a later time and have time for people to give us comments. I do have a question though, Lisa, about the idea of taking out the Sustainable Madison quote and putting in what the council is going to be saying. But it sounds to me like the council has a narrow view of health versus this wider range statement that Madison made. So are we narrowing the focus?
I would say this: if we're doing this statement because we want to nudge our city in a direction we think is the right way to go, and if we want to also establish a framework for the work of this committee going forward, revising the sustainable city plan in such a way that it doesn't just focus on the traditional environmental things such as solar and wind and community gardens, but does so through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to make issues like I brought up the lack of internet access for neighbors in our community. Is our community sustainable if these folks don't have access to what we would consider the basics of life right now? So if that's our focus, and I think it is, I just think we're better off trying to reference the work of our own governing body instead of the Madison Sustainable Madison Committee. And I think if we can incorporate language that maybe urges the city council to think more broadly, or to interpret public health in a way that links back to our area of focus, which is, the nexus between people and the environment. I think that would be a good thing to try to do.
Is the issue of concern that we are referencing another community and that doesn't have as much cachet within Middleton as referencing Middleton document, or is it the sentiment that's being expressed? Because I think the sentiment that we're expressing in this draft that we've borrowed from Madison is worth incorporating. I think it is part of, encouraging action of the council to address this. So we're kind of speaking to the council as well as to the community at large. And at the same time, we included the reference in part to acknowledge the source and to effectively communicate that we're not alone in coming up with this idea. This is part of the larger community's conversation. So that's just to give a little bit of the background for at least that part of the document.
Sure. And I appreciate that background, Kermit. I guess I would say it's both the content and the the connection, wanting to have a connection back to our own city. I will tell you, and please understand that I have a pencil cup that says no passion is greater than the passion to alter another person's draft. So that's me in a nutshell. And I have to write things for and with people on all sides of the political, lawmakers on both sides of the political spectrum. And so when I see phrases like the environment will continue to burn around us and the city of Middleton will never be sustainable, let alone survive, I see that and it right away tells me we need to, dial that back a little bit, because that's a little too much hyperbole for a mixed group of a mixed political group. I do really like the wording about let us engage this emergent moment. I mean, that's what sparked the action on our part. So I like that part, but I feel like we may maybe taking it a bit far to say that our community will not be sustainable or even survive, because of course it will. It just won't be the community we want it to be.
This is Katie. Would it work to simply remove that statement about if we don't, we won't make it? Does it work? Kelly, can you just scroll like one more sentence above?
Yeah.
I could be looking at this on my other device too. Oh, wait, whoa. Wait.
There it is.
Oh, okay. As a committee, we recognize that for a sustainable world, we need racial justice in the present and for the future. Accordingly, to vote in favor of legislation. I feel like that if we do not statement would be okay. We could go right from their safety and their health. Let us engage this emergent moment in a way. It's more succinct, and I absolutely do not want to insult anyone who wrote this because it's really lovely. But yeah, I don't want to push too far.
If I might, the takeaway here is that tone it back. It's coming across a little hyperbolic in a way that a number of us don't feel we can be totally on board with. So acknowledging Lisa's comment earlier that we don't necessarily want to get into all the nitty-gritty wordsmithing, I think that takeaway feedback is something that Daphne and Deb and I can factor into scrubbing through for a second pass. Does that seem fair, so we don't get bogged down in the
Okay.
commas and
Yep.
quotations and what have you?
That sounds good. Sounds good. And I also would encourage you, but I don't know how others felt about this, but in my volunteer work at Middleton Outreach Ministry, I know there are a lot of Hispanic clients at MOM, and I want to make sure that we are not inadvertently leaving out all people of color by focusing so much on you know, the problems of related to Black Lives Matter, or the Blacks suffer disproportionately from the violence our society does. You know, I know Hispanics are, especially undocumented Hispanic neighbors, are under different threats, but many of the same ones as well, like food insecurity. So I would encourage you to broaden it, have that be the tipping point moment for us, but make sure that all our neighbors of color are covered by this.
Question there, do we want to expand the umbrella for this document, or do we want to say, you know what, that's an important additional issue, but it's sufficiently distinct that it may warrant an additional document? I'm putting it out as a question. It's like, we can make it larger, but then it runs the risk of diluting the focus in terms of it addressing and responding to the Black Lives Matter and the Aubrey and Floyd and other killings. So I'm not saying we shouldn't address those issues.
Sure.
I'm just asking, do we want to do it and make this bigger, or do we want to say, you know, it's important and separate, and let's.
I would say I don't see it as diluting the message. I think taking a very granular moment, like what happened to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery before him, taking that moment and turning it into a charge and a commitment on the part of this committee to view sustainability through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that is powerful. And I think it's action. I mean, by definition, it's actionable. If we're going to take this moment and use it to compel us to really think about what we're building when we say we're building a sustainable Middleton, what does that mean? It can't just be solar installations. You know, we need to make sure there's more to it. Like the gardens, you know, the gardens are great, but maybe they're not accessible, either because of price, even with a sliding scale, or just simply transportation, you know, or where they're located. That's the lens that I think, as we go through the sustainable city plan, which we're going to get to very soon, I think that's the lens that this committee a month ago agreed we need to start looking through, because that's something we can do. There's a lot we can't do to change the world or our part of it. But this is something we can do. So I don't see it as diluting it. I see it as really empowering us to carry forward this work.
And I just wanted to get a quick comment. This is Dick. I really like what you said before, Lisa, about you not liking the people who we're sharing the world with coming after the natural world. And I think we should make a point, it's not about duality of one versus the other. Just make the point it's all inextricably linked. And just a subtle change on that, how that comes off, I think inextricably is, you can't have one without the other. And I think the Sustainability Committee has been focused mostly on the natural world and on climate change in the past, and how are we going to move forward in a sustainable society. We've got to bring people into it so that everybody is sharing in that, and somehow make that clear that's what we're talking about, and not one versus the other, or the word or. So your point about bringing people forward, I don't even know if it's putting it in front of people in front of the natural world, but somehow make it seem like they're inextricably linked.
So My personal opinion is I think this statement should be about Black Lives Matter, but somehow tie it in saying we're going to, as we work and build our sustainable city plan, to focus to make sure it's inclusionary of everybody. To me, the moment seems like it's a Black Lives Matter moment. You guys have been working on it. I think it's a great document, but I think personally, I think focus should be Black lives. And I do think obviously people, all races and people should be included in equity in there, but I think that's the step to bring it into the sustainability plan, if I have an opinion on it here.
Well, Spencer, what I wanted to mention was that we did have a discussion that was about this, in that we didn't want to make it sound like all lives matter, because that's the conservative response to Black Lives Matters. And when you start putting in lots of lives matter, I think it does start looking more like we're trying to say all lives matter, which is not what we're trying to say. So I really like the focus of Black Lives Matter with this particular document. And then we can expand that in the sustainability plan.
I just want to make a quick comment. This was a reaction that I had to somebody writing a letter to the editor, and they were talking about Black Lives Matter in lowercase rather than the Black Lives Matter movement and what all they are standing for. And I like what Lisa said about, Hispanics and brown lives, or people of color, and all the issues related to immigration. And so somehow broadening this, to me, to all people of color, including Black lives, but not making it specifically to that, just resonates a little more.
Yeah, and please understand, I am not at all suggesting, that Black Lives Matter is not important, that it's an all lives matter thing. I'm not suggesting that at all. I think, and again, I work on stuff like this all the time. I think there's a way to have the George Floyd murder and the Ahmaud Arbery murder be the Black Lives moment, or the Black Lives Matter moments that we come out and condemn and support the movement. But if we're just doing that, then I think we're selling ourselves short, because I really do think what we were talking about a month ago was how everybody felt sort of hopeless, and like this was we just couldn't get our minds around it. What is happening? Why is this happening? And we can't, as a committee, just focus on a Black Lives Matter lens to view all of our work through. It has to be sustainability for all. So I think starting out with a strong condemnation of what happened and strong support for Black Lives Matter is a great beginning. But if we don't conclude that we're moved by this incident to really focus our work on improving people's lives, all our neighbors' lives, all neighbors of color, everybody. If we don't conclude with that and commit to that action on the part, or as a committee, then I think we've lost an opportunity.
I think that's the best way to go about that, is to do the Black Lives Matter movement was what moved us. So I agree, Lisa, starting with that as kind of our starting point, but then instead of talking about how what we do will impact the world, which it will if we do things right by the environment, but I think making sure people understand that through this movement, we as a committee are set to look at things for everyone, makes a lot of sense for the ending of this.
I really like what you just said, Dick.
I do as well. This is Angie.
Okay.
This is Kelly. Can I just say one thing? I'm not really, I mean, you guys lead this and do what you are going to do. I can just give a bit of feedback. Perhaps you could do both, in that you start out using this, you know, very pointed, detailed language about Black Lives Matter and what happened, and then perhaps instead of dialing it back, not that you're really meaning to dial back the message, but instead of saying dial back, maybe just get more specific, like with the phrase, if we do not actively work to dismantle blah blah blah, continue to burn and will never be sustainable. Instead of being using hyperbole, perhaps you could say more directly what would happen in Middleton, or spin it positively and say, if we do our job right, then communities of color or Black lives will thrive in our community, and this is how. And perhaps, like, in addition to what you've already written, perhaps there's just like another paragraph or two that gets really specific on what the sustainability committee will do. I feel like it'd be great if there could be like something that we could be held accountable for, actions. And maybe there could be some actions that the committee takes and you actually list, and then maybe 2 or 3 recommendations for council, which is a larger governing thing. Like for council, my first thoughts are, you know, making the commissions and committees more diverse. And if that's difficult to do, then maybe do more public outreach and mentoring on bringing people into civic government. And then we could write, you know, within our plan, we intend to center Black communities and Indigenous and people of color when we, you know, devise policies that will address energy prices, energy costs, or access to solar, or, you know, kind of get a little bit more specific, because we do already have some of that stuff in our plan, so we can list that as accountability goals. And I had like 8 points, but I'll just put it in an email and put it in the notes as well, just as my comments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yep.
Hey, this is Katie. This is really nitpicky, but so I apologize in advance. But in the paragraph above, in particular, and all too subtly, Blacks. Can we say Black people?
Yeah.
And white people versus whites. You know, that's, I don't know. I think sometimes when people are racist and dismissive, they use that word. I'm not saying that you guys are being.
Yeah.
That didn't come out at all.
No, we get it.
We were grappling with that, and so basically we were looking at Googling to see what conventional usage was, checking the APA style guide, and it's essentially it's in the usage out there, but if people prefer or feel more comfortable with Black people, I don't have any real problem with that. Yeah.
Well, and another comment, this is even more nitpicky than Katie, but I've been like steeped in doing a witnessing whiteness class on Wednesdays. I just did this how to be anti-racist with League of Women Voters, and my local book club here in the neighborhood is doing white fragility. And I believe Black is capital, uppercase, but white is not.
Yeah, AP is still working through that. So AP style just came out with capital B for Black, but the white is being reviewed yet.
Yeah,
That's
and there
good
again,
to know.
we were opting for consistency given the ambivalence or ambiguity that we were finding, but.
And I think as long as we're consistent, I mean, from a communication professional perspective, that's how I look at it. As long as you're being consistent throughout, you know, I noticed in some cases we talk about a Black man, but then we talk about African American. So I'm not sure if that's how since these are quoted from, they're referenced from other publications, if that's how they were referenced. But consistency to me is usually the key.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Okay, so comments. writing group, do you have enough feedback from all of us? Would you
We need
like?
it in emails. We need it written out in emails.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're trusting, I've been taking some scribbled notes, but I'm trusting that Kelly's dancing fingers have keyboarded it in.
Yeah, I have a lot captured in separate notes.
Yeah.
If we're going to send comments, which individuals should we send them to, or which two individuals, so we're not doing the quorum?
Oh, well, just
Maybe
to the
we send them to
subcommittee would
Kelly?
probably be safest. Or to
Okay.
Kelly. Yeah, if you get them to Kelly, then she can forward them on to us.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
Great
So
job, though, you
comments-
guys.
Yeah, really, I totally appreciate the group writing project. It is, especially when you can't be in the same room. That's, I mean, I guess kind of we can, but not really. Kelly, what if does everybody think they could get comments to Kelly by Wednesday, end of the day Wednesday, so she can consolidate them all or aggregate them all and send them on to the writing group?
Could we make it a couple days more, because I'm going to be writing the notes for this meeting, and those might be helpful as well for this committee. Or Friday?
So by the end of the week, get your comments to specific comments to Kelly, and she'll share. Excellent. Okay. Well, let's move on then. We've got number 5 is the Sustainable City Plan, the Solid Waste and Transportation chapter presentations. And I'm going to turn it over to Angie. And oh wait, are we on this one?
No, I'm just scrolling down.
Just getting ready.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll turn it over to Spencer and Angie. Who wants to go first?
So we met a while ago now, Angie, myself, and Kelly, and we met 2 different times. We met once to talk about transportation, once to talk about solid waste. What we did is we went into the sustainability plan. So what we're trying to do is create a framework for everybody to come in and to break down the sustainability plan and make it a little easier for everybody to work with and to take their chunks and present it to everybody. So we did a meeting with Mark Opitz came in on it and had his 2 cents worth about transportation, and then we had the solid waste one, which Angie has a lot of good insight into it. I understand we have a couple of solid waste people on our call here today, so it'd be great to hear from anybody if we're totally off base with anything. But when you get into the sustainability plan, I don't know if you guys, Kelly, if you want to bring it up on the screen. Within it, there is, I guess it's page 5, maybe. There's the indicators for solid waste, and then there is the actions, and then there's indicators. So each of the different departments, there's indicators and actions and indicators and actions. So we just kind of went through and said, what do we want to still track? What is not relevant anymore? What are we missing since the world has changed in 2008? Dan Street had made comments on all these sections, and he had done it all in 2016, maybe? 17, the 2017 update. So that's kind of where the basis of what we did. And so he has comments on the side. Kelly has comments in red. So the things that are red, she has changed within the plan.
And they're just notes. They're just notes. Like, I didn't rewrite. I won't have time to like wordsmith and rewrite the sections for a while because of the comp plan project, but these are what we discussed in our meeting.
Hey, but this is Angie. Before we kind of dive into the tables and the details, does anybody mind if I just talk a little bit generally about the solid waste portion of this?
Please.
So we're all on the same page?
Yep, go ahead.
Go for it.
So I just wanted to make sure we sort of all understood what we were talking about. And when this part of the sustainable plan developed, it defined the solid waste as anything that we were throwing away, whether it was being directed to a landfill or whether it was being recycled or reused or composted. And I know there's something in here about incineration as well, but there's only 2 incinerators, I think, in the state, and Middleton's waste doesn't go to those. So that's really not part of the equation for us. We really focused on residential solid waste as being landfilled or recycled, and then to some extent reused. Composting is something that we haven't had a chance to take on. It's a lot harder for us to, I guess, get our arms around it, really understand how much we produce and exactly what we can do with it. So that's pretty much what we're dealing with. Our basic goal for this portion was to reduce the amount of solid waste that we generate so that we minimize our consumption of natural resources, and so that we also reduce the impact on human health and the environment by the waste that we create. And then I think as we go through the table, you'll see that for our, the first run at this, the majority of our effort and what we do with the waste it's focused on what we do with waste, not on minimizing the waste that we generate. So there are some indicators in the table that do try to address that, like use of plastics, but for the most part, we're really going after it once the waste has been produced. And then the other thing that I want to color the discussion with is that the way that we manage our waste and the information that we have on waste depends on a couple different things. And one of the things that depends on are our local, state, and federal regulations that govern waste, what we can do with it and what we have to do with it. The market value of the waste affects what we can do with it. And I guess public will and the desire of the community, what they want to see happen, sort of that feel-good thing, that also affects how we try to manage our waste. So in Wisconsin, we are actually required to recycle by law, both residential and non-residential waste. But the one thing about the state law, it says that all municipalities are required to report residential recycling to the state. And so because of that, the city of Middleton would produce a report every year. They get their information from their service provider, which is Pelletary, and they submit that to the DNR. And then the DNR has stats on residential recycling. So the important part about that is that non-residential entities are still required to recycle, but they're not required to report it to the state. So we really do not have metrics on anything but our residential recycling. And we rely on Pelletary for those numbers. Market value of waste impacts what we do. We saw that in the last couple of years when we weren't able to recycle the same types of plastics. Sometimes we're in a region where we're lucky, like with styrofoam, we have Unique and Wanakee, and they want our block styrofoam. We can collect it and provide it to them, but that is a really unique situation. It doesn't happen everywhere in the state. There are other things that we wish we could do, which we haven't been able to do, such as mattress recycling. Those are types of things we're going to have to look for, I think, regional groups to try and pull together our efforts and resources. And so I guess the only other thing I want to bring up is that I think education for solid waste management is critical. It's not as static a process as you would think. There is variability, and what we can do and what we can't do does change. So I think it's important for us to continue to try and educate the public about what we can do to learn what they want and see if there are ways that we can get that accomplished as well.
Along that line of education, is we on our original one, we had said we wanted to create an A to Z recycling guide. It's been created, but it's a very static document that sits in a PDF form on the website. And Kelly says I think she fields 3 to 5 emails a day about recycling, what you can and can't do, and where you can go. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it doesn't sound like I'm exaggerating very much in how many emails she gets on it. So we had talked about it, and one of the goals is to create some sort of online searchable database or piggyback on something that already exists, so people can actually search. Because if I want to figure out where I can recycle makeup at, do I want to dig through 30 pages of a PDF? No, I'm going to go and find it, just type it in there. So there's actionable items like that. I also think one of the important things when Angie's talking about education is that the first paragraph is telling the stories of what we've done. One of the things that we don't do a great job with on our committee is telling the stories of what we've accomplished. We've accomplished great things, and I think you need to make sure that gets spelled out and then figure out the action items in order to educate on it.
Hey, Kelly, can you scroll up on the page, please, to the thanks. And I think, yeah, what you're talking about is in the red in the middle of the page about those success stories, and then removing some of those items out that we've already completed.
We try to focus on things you can actually measure. There it was in past versions, we tried to do it, and then all of a sudden we realized we had no benchmarks. We didn't have the numbers. So we've done a lot of benchmarking. Over the last few years, I believe we're getting pretty close to having numbers we can build off on most of the stuff.
Yeah, and LEAD is requiring us to gather data community-wide on recycling and waste stream, and they're requiring us to look at all waste haulers. So we'll have info from Pelletieri for residential, but then I also need to track down every other hauler that has been hired privately for any other business. So as much of that data that I can get will provide a much more well-rounded snapshot, at least for 2020, on where we are as a community.
Composting is one that we're looking at what we want to do. Obviously, that's getting involved in different larger communities in the county to be able to pull all together. Trying to scan through. I don't know if we need to go through point by point. I think this is what these are our suggestions. We've taken them and said, Kelly, take this and use this as your format to expand on, to write it. Obviously, she'll come back with the draft at some point, and once we have each of these sections, we can send it off to people who are involved in our community who say review it and say, are we missing something? No, we could maybe send it to Pelletieri and say, is there bigger visions that we should be having? Should we send it to Mark Opitz and talk about the transportation, right? If we scroll down and go into transportation, just to look at that one also, a lot of discussions about things that never even existed in the past. Micromodal transportation, I can't remember the catchphrase that's happening, but these electric scooters and the whole street concept the city of Middleton, I believe, has adapted for when we're redoing streets to make sure there's transportation. As equity, we'd love to have more buses, but buses is not Middleton's buses, that's the larger region. So how do we provide transportation once they come into our city? And that's where the e-cycles, I think, is getting very close to launching here. If they aren't, that's where we're talking about electric scooter companies. That's where we're talking about good bike paths and connectivity of the bike streets and paths. Any other thoughts, Angie or Kelly, on our transportation conversations? Before I ask a question, I'm going to answer it. Sorry. I think airport we talked about. Airport gets people very excited right now. Our concept was let's let's look at the airport as a larger whole of sustainability. Some of it's out of our hands, some of it is not, but to have it on our radar also, I think, is a good thing.
Hey, this is Tim with Pelletieri. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, if you could go back up to the waste part, you know, you guys have such a success story to preach. You know, in 2006, you're probably still using 18-gallon recycling bins to collect recyclables. And then you went to 95-gallon carts to collect recyclables every other week. And then you went to 95-gallon carts of recyclables to collect weekly. Not only, and while that was all going on, the city held annual cleanup events where people could bring additional waste items, and the city recognized the fact that people had needs to get rid of a lot of things throughout the year. And you guys developed this fantastic recycling center that is definitely meeting the needs, because we're hauling a ton of cardboard out of there every week, and a lot of metal and a lot of wood. So you guys do have a huge success story to sing that you could put in that paragraph, in my opinion, as part of it. Not to mention the fact that, you know, when there's several communities your size that don't even have sustainability committees. You're one of two that I know of. So that alone is something.
Thanks for those good words. I think along those lines, you know, so we take successes, tell the story, and then we say, how do we want to proceed in the future, right? Can we have composting come in, and can we have our regular trash bins only go out once a week? So I could reduce the overall transportation needs because we don't need the trash trucks. Like, can we make it and shift it and really do really good things, which I think is awesome. So I appreciate those words.
Yep. You know, and as far as where to go, you know, I mean, what we've experienced in the last 3.5 months with this COVID thing is we're seeing the average resident in Middleton, and we analyzed 4 communities, and they're all within 1/10 of a pound, but the average resident home is generating 3 pounds of more waste in a week. Middleton, because you offer weekly recycling, a lesser percentage of that waste is going to the landfill. And we can show that in black and white. The point is, we're in our changing times. 3 pounds doesn't sound like much, but when you have 50,000 homes, that adds up to 75 tons a month. And you can imagine the strain that causes on the whole entire residential system. So getting people, I mean, more and more people are going to be working from home in the future, I think. This is opening up a lot of eyes. And so to look at the residential and how that's going to change and the needs there is something to really kind of look at in the future.
Hey, I'd like to ask a question. This is Dick. Of the recyclables that we're picking up or you're picking up, what proportion of it is actually being recycled? Is there a lot of stuff that's going in the recycling bins that are not able to be recycled?
Well, I can't speak specifically for Middleton. I can only talk about our plant as a total, but I can tell you that when we opened the plant 10 or 12 years ago, we were averaging maybe 3 to 5% contamination rate. In the last 8 months, we're probably averaging close to 18 to 20% contamination rate. And a lot of that is coming from wish cycling. And I'm not going to blame Amazon on it, but you know, too many people get those cardboard boxes and leave the contents in them and throw them into the cart. And all that loose plastic just adds up, and it cannot be recycled. So there's a lot of wish cycling going on. A lot of people have good intentions, but it's not, we don't think it's due to neglect. It's, again, education. And we've heard about education tonight. We've added like a dozen videos on how to properly prepare recyclables that anyone can go on and look at.
Yeah, I didn't get the word, but wish cycling, spell that out, or so I can hear it a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, wish cycling, WISH cycling. A lot of people.
Like they
look
wish
at-
they could.
They wish
yeah,
they could
they look at this
recycle it.
thing, they look at the thing in their hand and they say, well, is this trash or recycling? Well, we'll let the recycler decide. Whereas in the old days, it used to be they'd let the landfill decide. But yeah, there's a lot of wish cycling. How many dirty diapers why people think they can recycle dirty diapers is beyond me. I mean, that's probably one of the single most huge contaminant for some reason. But but other ways that the recyclables have changed and why you guys jumping to weekly service, I mean, back in 2000, people were still reading a lot of magazines and newspapers and not drinking a whole lot of water. Well, think about the last couple of years, how people are buying a lot of water and not reading as much. So that those water bottles take up more volume space in your cart than does the newspaper. So it's not all about weight, but it's about volume. And the challenge is that just the changes in how we live has affected the whole thing.
Well, another thing is grocery stores seem to have plastic clamshells wrapped on everything. Can you recycle those?
If they're cleaned out, yes.
You have a market for it?
They typically can be blended in with number ones. Yes, they're as long as they're clean.
Okay.
This is Angie, and I just wanted to talk a little bit too about, the last comment you said about how we may be increasing the volume of what we're recycling, but the weight might actually be decreasing. And I think we have to consider that when we're looking at the metrics for our plan. We've had it in different areas where, like, I think one of the line items is the weight of batteries, but we made a decision that recycling alkaline batteries was not a sustainable practice and moved away from that. So if we continued to track just the weight of the numbers, it might not look like success. So I think for some of these items, we have to find a way to really tell the story that better reflects how effective we are at diverting material from the landfill and getting it somewhere else where it can be reused or recycled.
That's great.
Point.
There is one other thing I wanted to bring up as well. We've been talking about environmental justice, and I did a little bit of research on how maybe we could make a difference in the solid waste section of the plan with respect to everything we've been talking about. And some of the topics are like where you might type landfill or where our wastes are managed, how that might impact certain communities. But I think on a larger scale, there's something called sustainable product and extended producer responsibility. And what it does, it takes the cost of an item and it looks at the expenses incurred for production, distribution, use, and then final disposal, and it integrates that cost into the initial cost of the item. So, when you're buying batteries, or actually I think electronics are a much better example for us because we have a regulated electronics recycling program within the state, and manufacturers that produce and sell electronics in Wisconsin currently pay based on the weight of electronics that they sell. That money goes into a fund and supports electronics recycling within the state. But we know that electronics have become lighter and lighter. Like if you think about your CRT televisions and computers, monitors from years ago, and now you think about all the TVs that we have and how light they are, that system isn't really supporting or funding electronics recycling in Wisconsin anymore. So it's this, I guess what I'm saying is there's two things here. There are options out there that we can explore and try to promote within Wisconsin that will build in the expense of a product and transfer that expense to the consumer instead of to the ratepayer in general, the taxpayer who has to pay for all the disposal. And then the other thing again is looking at the weight versus the volume of what we're producing and how that impacts the story that we're telling and what we're doing with the waste.
Angie,
That's all I've got.
do you have like a specific action in the solid waste chapter related to the extended, what was the phrase you used? The extended producer responsibility or stewardship or?
Yep, I didn't edit this document to include that, but I'd like to send some recommendations to be considered for it. But there are other states that are doing work on more than just electronics. There's one of some states have taken on batteries, carpet, tires in some places. Solar panels are even being produced this way in some states where the cost of disposing of that solar panel is included in the original
price.
It goes to the consumer, and then there's always a place for them to take it at the end. And I think that's the other key part is when you implement this type of system and the person who consumes pays, there's actually a destination for it at the end.
That'd be great.
That would
So
be great.
hopefully you guys, as we break down these different chapters in there, the goal is to get some good insight, some good thought to it, and provide Kelly with structure for redoing it to take a little load off of Kelly's shoulders here. So keep that in mind. Kelly, who is presenting next month?
Next month it's water, and it's water and land use. Lathrop, Hilliard, and Hanairo.
Perfect.
Kelly, how did you get stuck with the chapter?
She volunteered.
She's the glue that holds it all together.
I like
She
the water
volunteered.
stuff.
Isn't public outreach next month too?
I see. Oh yes, you're right. We do.
Okay.
We doubled up on August, so we've got health, public outreach, and education too.
Okay. So we know these can take a little while. If we try to keep the rest of the agenda a little bit lighter, maybe we can get into the meat of it a little bit more if we need to. And since we have 3 of them on the next one.
I had a question about solid waste. Do we is recycling available in apartment buildings or condo buildings?
It is required to be by law.
Most apartment buildings have the standard city pelletier trash cans that we're doing. The condos are the same. Sometimes they are all dumpsters, and sometimes they're bins they roll out on their own.
Okay. And do we have information like the videos that were mentioned on the Pelletier website or even our own A to Z guide? Are those available in Spanish as well as English?
No, I don't know about Pelletieres, it might be, but our A to Z guide is not.
Okay.
It's a good goal to keep changing there.
That's something we had talked about in the but didn't have a for, so maybe that's something we can consider moving forward for multiple pieces of this plan or all of the plan.
Well, and I forget why the website came up. Oh, well, I guess because the A to Z guide is a PDF on the website. And one of the things that Kelly and I have been talking about looking ahead to the coming year, which could be a good segue into our budget discussion. I had mentioned to Kelly my desire to see the committee devote some of our resources to really beefing up a sustainability website and including, kind of like how Spencer was talking about having a searchable, a more interactive way to find out exactly what you are looking for. How do you recycle, or can I recycle such and such? And I think we've got a lot of potential to really redo the site. We have to be consistent, I guess, with the city's branding. But I think especially if we do some of the ideas that Kelly's got, like putting up informational displays at the at Lakeview Park, talking about solar. I mean, we have a real opportunity to expand our reach on the education and of our neighbors, and maybe even do it in a bilingual fashion, just like the school district does.
Awesome. I think that's a great idea. QR codes and I mean the whole thing to get them, draw people into it, I think would be a great, perfect.
Yep. All right. So what's the next? Go ahead.
I have some process-related questions as far as the review and the update proposals we're doing here. Seeing as Spencer and Angie, you guys pioneered this with the first one for us as a committee. One, I guess, did you guys meet with Kelly? And Kelly was kind of like a resource and record taker or note taker. And is that something that we would recommend that we all do, or was that just an exception to the rule, or what? So one question.
I'll let Kelly answer that in a second, but we had sent Kelly when our dates we were going to meet were. We had coordinated and worked it around Kelly's schedule. It was valuable insight, and it's great to see Kelly see it. Seems like she wanted to. I'm not sure if she has time to do all of them, but it'd be great if she was there for some help and guidance.
Okay, and what's Kelly's thoughts as far as the other chapters and your involvement?
I'd be happy to attend any of the subgroup meetings and maybe help take notes and then pass the notes off to the subgroup, or else do it. I mean, I simply put the notes into the plan in this rough format and then didn't go back and mess with it much, just because I don't have time right now to like rewrite this 100-page plan as well. But it's a good first step to get the ideas into the plan, even at this level.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we should encourage the groups who are working on the August chapters to have a get together and include Kelly. Well, Kelly will be included in my group because she's doing that chapter. Who wants to take? I can take the lead, Kelly, on contacting you and Dick to set up a time. So that, because I hate to put it on you to reach out to all of us. So who from the Health and Public Outreach and Education wants to take the lead in setting up a meeting?
We set up a meeting for this Friday from 4:35. There's a reason we're very specific. 4:35 to 5:30.
Oh, good.
We have actually met once before and gone through this because we thought we were coming up pretty shortly.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Kelly, I don't know if you can make that or not. I can always forward you the notes we've taken so far, or I can forward them once we've had the meeting if you can't make that time.
Yeah, I probably can't make the Friday, and that's fine. I'm fine with any subgroup going ahead on their own, and that's totally fine.
I'll include you in the notes after we follow up.
Great, Chris. Thanks.
And as far as note taking, then, like whether with you or on our own, using this table format, which is the way the goals I think have been previously documented, and just adding additional thoughts or questions provides an adequate level of input for our purposes.
I think so.
And does that also line up with Kelly?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. And the simple last logistical question comes to mind is, where is this document such that we would be able, others of us could still review it? Because, you know, like others have said, oh, I'd like to scroll back or scroll down, and in this format, we don't have that option to really review it. in case
Right,
we have any
this-
questions.
This one that
So
we're
can-
viewing now, we haven't seen before. I mean, we've
Right.
seen an earlier version, but this
Yeah.
one has more notes in it.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I could.
And so
I
I'm wondering, how can we get a copy of that amongst the committee to be able to see that? And then second to that is, can we get whatever editable version you would like us to use to develop and take notes in?
Yeah, let's see. Well, the way we're doing the comp plan, and the comp plan isn't a committee-wide effort, so it's a little different, but we do update our website so that anyone in the community can see the latest version of the comp plan with a web link. And it might be a way that once a section we've gone through it and added our notes and our new actions, we can have that on the website for everyone to review, on the sustainability page perhaps. I'll send this one around for sure right away so that you all have it. And then,
Actually, Kelly, can you hold off a day and let me make a couple other edits to it and get it back to you?
oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's
Thank
no
you.
rush on that.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
okay. And so, and as far as getting an editable version for our own use or for the different teams' use,
Kelly, you sent something out earlier, when we first started talking about this. I think you sent a
Right.
Word version.
Yeah, I
And
think I've
I'm
sent
not
it
sure if
several
that's
times
still
as a
it.
Word version. I can resend it as a Word version.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I have the current, most recent base version we're working from.
Right, having the most up-to-date version, which it sounds like Angie's going to incorporate some stuff into, and making sure it's a Word version so that we can put in our own notes and comments like that. That's a good action item to take.
And just in terms,
Hello? I'm not hearing Kermit. Is anyone hearing me? Can you all hear me? Maybe add something in the chat.
Baselines prior to showing the resolution. But yeah, I completely agree that the resolution is meant to be kind of like a goal and not so nitpicky. And yeah,
right.
so I share that. I completely understand that view.
Well, if you believe a lot of what people were writing, I mean, this last issue with Time Magazine was a really good one. If we don't meet some big goals by some reasonable amount of time down in the future, we are screwed. And we need to have some really aggressive stuff going forward, and we'll figure stuff out if we have a commitment to meeting lofty goals. And so I really don't want us worrying about, well, can we meet 40% waste reduction now? Just figure out we want a goal of that, and maybe it's not possible. Okay, then we'll adjust it. But let's get the goal there and force the school board to make a commitment on this. And don't let the school administration pour cement around our feet.
Can we invite Mrs. Ames to be on our September meeting?
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I think that would be great because I feel like I'm just moving back between the sustainability committee and talking with Mrs. Ames. I'm always trying to bring forth like an agenda and trying to push Mrs. Ames to keep moving forward. So it'd be really great if I wasn't doing that alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kelly, can you extend an invitation? Kelly, we can't hear you. Kelly's
Muted.
back.
She's back but muted.
She's muted.
Yeah, we can do that. I was gonna say to Daphne, we can bring it as a committee. Do you want to do the September meeting? We could put her first on the agenda so that she doesn't have to stay for all the 2-hour deliberations.
Yep, that would be good.
That would be good. Does the school board always meet the third Monday of the month? I mean, she usually is at the school board meetings. I was just wondering.
Oh,
Well, ask her.
That could be a problem. Yeah, we can.
yeah. Is that a direct conflict by time, or is that just a conflict by day?
They're meeting right now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're talking about school next year being all virtual.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Can
we'll
we move
figure
on?
out a way to have a conversation with Mrs. Ames. If it can't be having her at one of our meetings because they conflict with the school board meeting, then I think having a small subcommittee, maybe Kermit and I and Kelly
Yeah.
and you, Daphne, and you know, whatever what's the critical mass, 5, 4?
Yeah, sub-quorum.
Yeah.
5 is a quorum.
Okay, I'd be happy to take time to talk with her and just, you know, express our enthusiasm with what you're doing and what the possibilities are and the need to have aspirational goals and get started.
And
That'd
as
be great.
the clock is ticking. We don't
Yes.
have another 50 years to figure this out, you know?
Right.
We have a short time. And I know COVID is consuming everybody right now, but there's got to be somebody that can do something besides COVID, you know, so that we can move things forward with other initiatives. And this is a huge one. We cannot accomplish the goals of the city without the school district. We have to have the school district.
Yep.
Very important.
That's an excellent point, Deb. Okay, well, now that we have Kelly back, Kelly, can you blaze through our budget discussion and our governor's task force items on the agenda?
Sure. So what's happening is that in the next few months, the city's going to go through its budget process, and this is the one-shot time you have to ask for money from the city for capital expenditures or operating budget increases for the committee, and you only get this one shot. There's not really, you can't really go to council in the middle of the year and ask for a large sum of money, even if it's an amazing project. You have to wait out the budget cycle. So I also apologize because I'm still new to this and not as familiar with the budget cycle. I started around this time last year, right? And I didn't know what was happening around me for at least 4 months. But there's some decisions that the committee could make now. One is last year, Lee Schwartz, who was on the committee, really pushed to ask council for an increase in our operating budget. I think it had been 9,000 or something, and he asked council if we could push it up to 11,000 for operating budget to spend each year as a committee, and they compromised and they gave us 10,000. So we did get an increase last year in the operating budget. The operating budget is an amount of money that we have for one calendar year, and then it goes away, so there's no carryover. If we don't spend our operating budget this year by December, then that money we lose that. Capital budget is asking typically for larger items. It doesn't necessarily have to be larger items, but sort of one-time expenditures. So if the committee does want to push forward an initiative or a program or a capital budget expenditure, then we would need to produce a request to put it through the budget process sometime in August. So it's coming up very quickly. And I think because of COVID, there wasn't so much buzz about it earlier, and maybe because other city staff know the timeline, but the timeline just was released last week, and we're having our first budget meeting as a staff, like a kickoff meeting tomorrow, where they talk about the cycle. And then we have to submit our capital budget asks by August 14th, I believe. I wrote down the schedule here. Let me scroll down. This right here, if you can see my screen, is the budget schedule, and I'll send this out in the notes so that you're aware. But on August 14th, the capital improvement plan requests are due. And the budget's going to be really tight this year. They're already planning on doing hiring freezes. So it's not really a time where I think they're gonna grant a lot of new money for projects. They want to kind of hold on to what they can, I believe. I mean, Katie can probably talk to this more better than I can. But I did write down a list of things that are just ideas because they came to the top of my head of things we've been talking about as a committee over the last year, of ideas we could flesh out more very quickly. But in our operating budget, and then I'll let you deliberate or discuss, but our operating budget right now, we haven't spent very much money. This is the operating budget up here, these numbers. So we had a total budget of 10,000. The year-to-date balance is, we have 9,571 available right now. That doesn't include the bird renewal, which was 125. So really we have about $9,400 left in our operating budget to spend by December. So we can spend that on what we want. Typically it's been spent on things for the recycling center, like signage. Different recycling vendors require that we purchase recycling boxes. We've spent it on conferences for mostly for city staff. But these were some ideas that Lisa and I talked through, providing some fleet training for our mechanic. Now everything would be online, of course, so that actually reduces the costs greatly for any kind of training opportunities that we could provide. There's a Lakeview Park Shelter sustainability display, which might be something we want to spend some money on before December, or maybe it will be pushed to next year because of the schedule of our solar installations. And there's a few other things that I wrote down here, but I just wanted to, I don't know whether to have like actually schedule a separate budget meeting just for the committee, since it's a very timely item, but it's also late tonight, and I don't know how much deliberating you want to do, or if you need some time to think about it or digest it. We don't have to make decisions on our operating budget tonight. We have that money until December, but I just wanted you to know where we're at right now with our budget and operating. And then the sort of the big looming question is if we want to ask for any larger amount of money for capital spending, like for resiliency planning or fleet replacement upcharges, or if we want to talk to the operations department and say we want to purchase some hybrid police interceptors, and if the budget really isn't there, then maybe we could go in and make a budget ask for that difference to trial a police interceptor. You know, there'd be a few $1,000s ask. I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
So I think as far as capital projects, we've talked about also is compost, a pilot project to try to get that going. I kind of feel like we have to just make a jump at that sometime. We talked about creating a resiliency plan for the city. After our floods of 18, like that could be, I don't think the staff has the time to do it, but I think could we contract that out to have a resiliency plan? So those are two big ticket items that I think you could. I also think a fleet. I mean, if I like the fleet training to do that this year also, but to train like electric vehicles, we got to have some electric vehicles on our. Like it's embarrassing our fleet of vehicles, and I don't think a hybrid is going to do it anymore. You got to go all electric, in my opinion.
So Kelly, I like your idea of having scheduling a separate budget meeting because it is late and I don't want to rush through this or the next item. What's the process for doing that? I mean, if we've got to get something in for the capital budget by August 14th, that means the next couple of weeks, I would think.
I'd be willing to volunteer to help out on it. I don't want to organize it, but I can. I will definitely be happy to do it.
I'd be happy to organize it if we could get a quorum. Maybe I could send out a doodle and see if we could find a time where there's a quorum of people that could attend.
This is Chris. I'd help however I can.
Great.
Okay.
I'm good at spending money.
Kelly, will you have time to put together some ideas for, I think it's always easier to react to ideas on paper than it is to, you know, just brainstorm. I think you've got a lot of great ideas listed there, but you know, I'm trying to get my mind around what the capital budget request might look like if we wanted to purchase electric vehicles or procure the services of, you know, somebody who could write a resiliency plan for us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the time right now to like do like really formal proposals where I've gotten all kinds of quotes and then I write a memo explaining the benefits of this. Like I know I couldn't do that in the next 2 weeks.
Sure.
But I could put something better together than this. I could also, I think if we're going to push the fleet stuff, I just really wish we could have Brian on board because there's 2 hurdles. There's Brian and the police department and the operations staff to convince. And then beyond that, then you have the financial upcharges of all that. For electric vehicles, we might be able to get some grant money from the energy office, state energy office. But for the police interceptors, they really don't have all electric vehicles for police yet, but they do have the hybrid, and it's like, it's a quick payback. It's sort of a no-brainer. It's like the low-hanging fruit to go along with pushing for the electric vehicles. So that, I mean, there's a lot of work to do also interim this month. And I was really hoping that everyone could have made it to the fleet meeting.
Yeah, that's
Would the
very
capital,
sad.
would our slice of the capital budget question related to electric vehicles or hybrids be saying, okay, we're going to help for a pilot project or to cover the upcharge? Is that a legitimate option, or does it have to?
I'm thinking that, I'm not sure. I mean, I also would need to ask around to see really what the best strategy would be, but we have a fleet replacement schedule. It's not just that we get like, it's not like someone's going back to the drawing board, like, what cars do we need? Like, it's been planned out many, many, many years in advance when the schedule when we replace cars. So we need to look at the cars that are up for replacement this budget cycle and see which of those would fit with an electric replacement or a hybrid replacement if it's a police squad car, and then and look at the upcharges for those to see how much additional money it would cost. And I mean, we would have to work a little bit on return on investment for some of that. Like the hybrids in our energy plan that we just produced with OEI and Slipstream, they broke all that down for us, and we could make a pretty good case to council, I think, with the data we already have from it being analyzed. But it's really getting Brian on board and then just realizing how much money we need to do that.
And given the ROI is there, do we need to actually make a capital budget request for the sustainability committee, or are we really just wanting to find ways to encourage other departments to just tip the scales a little bit to make the decision in favor of a more sustainable and ultimately more cost-effective option?
Yeah, I think really that's it. I think it would just really help if the sustainability committee were there at the finance meeting and with our request in conjunction with the operations request.
It just feels to me like our mission is to really show the city how to meet all these sustainable goals. And so plans and this energy thing that you just discussed make a lot of sense, but to actually put in our budget request to money to buy a police vehicle or some other vehicle, that has to come from the departments that buy this stuff. We need to have all the plans in place, all the documents, all the roadmap laid out. How are we going to meet our overall sustainable goals? We can convince the Common Council that this is what they need to be spending money on, and put it in the budgets where they buy this stuff, and not try to say, well, do we need a few $1,000s in a capital budget to help leverage some other department, buy something that they wouldn't buy otherwise? It just doesn't feel like we should be wasting our time on that. But on these studies that really show the roadmap, how to get to the goals, that's where we should be spending our money.
Okay, Kelly, going back to your comment about being at the finance committee meeting, which one are you referring to? I see
I'm not
4.
sure right off the top of my head. I'd have to look
Okay.
at we haven't even had our budget kickoff meeting yet, so we'll have some of that information after our meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
So let's get a group of us together and try to get the budget, get some requests together. That sounds good.
I would be up for either next Monday at 6, because I'm doing the Madison information session on the solar group buy, or 2 weeks from today, anytime, if those dates work.
Well, send out a proposal with a doodle on it, and we'll see who can come and not. And maybe we don't need a whole committee, just a couple of people making suggestions to Kelly.
Okay.
At some
Kelly,
point, though, we need approval by the full or by a quorum, right?
Yes. Okay, so who's going to send the doodle poll? Spencer, did you say you would organize it or you wouldn't?
No,
no, I don't have time to organize it.
I can do a doodle.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. All right, and then the last item is the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change Statement and Written Comments discussion. Kelly, I know you spoke at the final meeting because you and I had our conversation before that. Can you tell us about your comments? And do we have a draft letter, or are you looking for someone to take your comments and turn them into a draft letter that we can submit as a committee?
Well, that would be awesome. I spoke as the sustainability coordinator for Middleton at the last Governor's Task Force on Climate Change listening session, basically covering the points right here that are shared on the screen. And I can go through them if you'd like me to. I also want to submit a written statement from our city, but have the mayor and maybe some council members sign it so that it comes from elected officials, because they already have my statement. So just so they hear from Middleton from a variety of people. And so I was planning on covering some of these topics that are bulleted. I'd be happy to draft like a 1-pager or 1.5 pager. And I could send it out before July 31st for some feedback from committee. I guess what I'm asking for is due to the time limit and workload, that you're okay with me going ahead and doing this and having this letter come from the mayor and maybe some elected officials. If you would also like to have a statement come from the committee as a whole, that's also okay. You know, you could, it's whatever you want. But I'm sort of running out of bandwidth and time to create a lot of different letters from different people and get them approved from all these different entities. I'm just kind of maxed out on documents and more workload. I'm looking for your blessing to go ahead and make a written statement on some of these goals, and then have the mayor sign off on it. It would be nice if some committee members could look through there and say like, oh, she forgot like this big, massive topic that I think we need to have in there. That would be helpful. I could send this around via email, and you could give me feedback like, looks fine, or you really missed this thing, add that in.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd say send it around and invite comment. And ultimately, are you proposing that we as a committee all sign on to that same letter that you're trying to get the mayor and alders to sign on? Because I'm personally comfortable sign on anything that you draft. think you have the heart and spirit of the committee and the sustainability issue. And so even if I don't see it, I'd sign it. If you
Here,
wrote
here.
it. If you,
Here,
I
here.
could,
I agree.
I could draft it, send it around for feedback, add in any comments you all give me, send it around again. And if I hear from you or not, you know, if there's no one saying that have a problem with it, then I could sign your name to it if you're comfortable, or you can tell me I can or can't sign your name as a committee.
Well, are we talking, I just want to be clear, I understand what we're talking about. So, because I do agree, it's very important to, in fact, I would say more important to have the mayor and elected officials sign something and submit that as a formal comment. It would be great if the sustainability committee could be involved too, but you know, if you only have time for the one, Kelly, I think the statement for the mayor and the common council members would be the best. And I agree that, you know, I trust you to draft something that's going to nail it. If we want as a committee to weigh in with a comment, I think we can, but I don't want to task Kelly with having to do something separate. And frankly, whatever we would sign on to should be consistent with what we're asking, you know, what our mayor is doing at our urging, right? So I kind of feel like, what if we just review what Kelly, what if Kelly shares with us these points that she's got? We can get back to her with, oh, you forgot this, or maybe frame this one, you know, a little differently. And then she can take those points, turn it into a letter with our blessing, and get the mayor and others to sign it.
right. The additional point of strategy and question is, do we want to add our signatures to that same letter? I think that would be an acceptable way to multiply the weight of that comment by adding our committee's members' names to it.
Yeah, I think we could take what letter Kelly gets out of the mayor, and we as a committee can prepare just a quick cover letter saying, hey, you know, Lieutenant Governor Barnes, we second, you know, we echo what our elected officials say, and just want to highlight the importance of doing what they asked. And, you know, we're committed to lending our support, you know, helping out however we can.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. I think that does increase the impact by having a separate or an additional document then.
Okay. Other members, how do you feel about that?
I think it's great.
That's fine.
Okay.
Send it out, we'll review it, get feedback, and then you can decide whether we've done a formal action of the committee or you've just gotten feedback from the committee, because we really need to vote on something if it is us as a committee endorsing something.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, so
And
it sounds like
point of order on that issue, the deadline is officially July 31st. So is there a way that we can vote on or approve a document
like through email
before our next meeting, basically?
I suppose if you wanted to, we could have a 5-minute quorum call where you vote and then it's done. It's one more step to take. I don't want to burden the committee too much with like extra meetings, because I think with the comp plan coming up, we'll probably end up having extra meetings for review of that, kind of like the Pheasant Branch stuff, how that worked.
Well, if it's 5 minutes.
I can handle a 5-minute call from anywhere.
Why can't we vote?
It's even better.
Let's just vote by email. Get the document back. After we do feedback, get the document back. We either agree with it or don't. And if you get enough people from the committee that vote for it, then we pass it as a committee.
Kelly, can we do that? Are email votes allowed?
I think so.
Oh.
I think you have to have public.
I think it's past all of our bedtime,
I think
Kelly.
there was a motion to adjourn.
we're in COVID land. We have to be able to do this, you know?
Yeah.
I think you have to be able to have public comment if you have a quorum to vote. You have to notify the public. I don't know how you notify the public of an email vote.
I'm not sure. I'll ask Abby what the rule is on that.
Because if we're, yeah.
This is Angie. I know in the past we've had to call an emergency meeting to get a vote.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, what you said.
Angie said that in the past, they've had to call an emergency meeting to get a vote.
Yeah. Can I find out about that and get back to you?
That sounds good.
Okay.
In the interest of time, Kelly, do you need to read the action items to us or not?
I don't know.
Included in the minutes.
Okay. I can tell you, Kelly, one that you missed was Daphne. She's got the pledge for us all to sign. Maybe she already spoke to you about that. And so I'm going to broadcast it on Nextdoor, and we're all committing to reaching out to our contacts to try to get as many signatures on the pledge as we can.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right.
It's already on the Katie Nelson Alder Facebook page.
Thank you. And Katie, thank you for sending out the recycling update to your constituents. That was really helpful.
That's great. Okay. I think we've covered everything on our agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Hey, guys.
just to, right, everyone seconded.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right. Well, thank
And
you
don't
guys.
forget, individual comments to the task force are allowed and welcome, so you don't even need to wait for the bureaucratic overhead. You want them to take action.
All right, so everyone go forth and get signatures for Daphne's, for the pledge, and consider submitting a comment, and we'll hear from Kelly this week with the action items, and also remember to get your comments to Kelly on the equity statement, the Black Lives Matter statement by the end of the week. All right, thanks everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.